Testing. Listen, students are confused about the rules of AI, and they should be. Teachers are not consistent, and maybe they shouldn't be. Let me explain. If, depending on your learning area or your subject, how you use AI might be a little different. And that means that when I say it's different, we also have to be different, fundamentally different. And I just was watching a video and it talked about a study that was done by Harvard about the effectiveness of teaching with a PowerPoint in front of the class in the classroom. And it showed, and this is an older study. If you guys want to know what the study was, I can go and find the link to it. But it's an older study, but we've known this for years. We've actually known this for decades, that this is not the most effective way of teaching. And yet, we continue to teach that way. Here's the funny part. We will tell students that they do not know how to use AI appropriately, so we don't want them to use it in the classroom, but yet we do not have a way to teach them how to use it appropriately, a structured way, a way that's consistent across classes, because students are confused because they go from one class with a widely adopted use. Maybe they're working with it in the classroom, like my classrooms. We're working it with the classrooms daily when we're working on assignments or brainstorming or doing any of the things. It's integrated into my classes. It's integrated into the assignments and assessments. So at the end of the day, they go through that class, and then the next class, literally the next class, they walk out of my door, they walk into another classroom door, and that teacher is absolutely telling them any use of AI is going to be considered plagiarism, and they will get an F on that assignment. Any use. And so I can understand students are confused. I would be confused as a student. And here's what's happening, which is crazy. Students that are coming out of my classroom going into the other classroom, they're asking this very, very simple question: why? Why can't I use it? If I, and even to the point of arguing with the instructor, showing them that if I use it this way, if I am integrating my thoughts, ideas, if I'm having AI ask me questions and I'm responding to those questions and I'm thinking through those questions to be able to come up with the response, they're arguing with their teacher saying, what if I do it that way? Is that okay? And the answer is still no. And they're confused because they're like, wow, I still am thinking, because they were shown how to use it appropriately in order to make sure that they are integrated into their response answer. They're thinking, they're learning. They're not just floating, letting AI take over. And because of that, they're very frustrated with that second class. And I'm frustrated for them. I've said in the past, I feel like those instructors who are throwing a blanket no use policy of AI in their classrooms are hamstringing their students. They're handicapping them in the real world. It is not a optional skill in the workforce. It's not optional. It is becoming more and more required. And those skills are big bullet points on that resume. What have you built with AI? What have you done with AI? What can you do with AI that would help make that business more efficient and create better quality? It is just a disservice, in my opinion, to those students to throw a blanket over AI and say, look, we're not going to even talk about it in this class. Don't even think about it. But I also think that it's really important for districts and educational systems, their education departments, these admin in your high schools and your schools, to really think about a structured adoption policy. In California, we are the community college system as well as the state college system is, from the chancellor's office down, is really pushing AI literacy, and not saying that it's optional, but really saying you need to do this in your classes. Every instructor, every discipline, we need to be integrating this into the classrooms, into assignments. How is really the question. How should we do that? And how can we do that? And I know that we have many educators that are absolutely not thrilled about this idea. I get it. I get it. They've been doing this for a very long time. And why change what they've been doing? And my answer to that is because what you've been doing, with no disrespect intended, is not working. And it's not really your fault. I mean, we've been taught how to teach ineffectively. It's the teachers that don't follow those rules that happen to be more effective. It's the teachers that think outside the box, that don't follow the budget constraints that the schools give us. It's the teachers that, push the limits of what is being said that you can do in a lesson plan. I mean, it's those teachers that are having their students say, this is the best class ever. It's not the teachers. Again, I guess maybe there is a few teachers, but in generality, when I'm talking to students and I'm talking to administrators and I'm talking to faculty, it is not the students that continue just to follow the standard practices of teaching that are engaging their students. And I get it. I haven't been in high school as an instructor for about 15 years. I was a substitute teacher in junior high school as well as in high school for about 10 years. I was a long-term sub. I did emergency subbing, but I did that for 10 years as I was coaching, teaching, and building businesses. I was doing that as a substitute teacher. I love teaching, and substitute teaching was tough. And so I have a lot of empathy for teachers, and I especially in high school nowadays, which is so much different than it was 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And I just feel like what I have seen in my general ed students, when we are working on something with AI and I'm teaching them a new skill that is not only prevalent to their current age and the day, something that they could use not only to help them in school but in life, and teaching them a way to do that, not just how to use it as a second Google, or just not how to just have it do something for them where they're not really thinking or doing, they're just having it do stuff. Students are more engaged in my class, and the diver framework where I'm having students do the discovering of the information, and I get it. Teachers will tell me, my students don't read, and so we're using Play Pause It, and we're using other software to help them, to force them to read. We're putting stuff in Canvas where we have little, Easter eggs where if they are actually reading the text that's in Canvas, it will, tell them to do something, and that unlocks the next module. And so we're forcing them to look for those things. And all those are creative and awesome ways to force students to read that content. And I just guess that for me, because I know most of that content is already it's existing out, unless I guess in your class you're creating absolutely customized, brand new stuff that you don't want them to find on the internet. In general, the information that they can find on the internet by you providing sample prompts for them to use, and then they have to be the one that discovers that information. I feel like when I've taken the book out of the students' hands and said, can you find this information on the internet? And then use the book to verify the information that you found, they tend to do a lot more reading than just telling them, read the book. And I'm not really sure why that is. In my classes, we've gone through this section of the class in the beginning where we have, at the beginning of the classes, we do a little bit of, we have I have a lot of morning classes. And so, I give the students about 10 or 15 minutes to talk about what they know about a subject. What do you already know? And then they talk to someone around them. What do you already know? And I can kind of hear when it starts to die down a little bit. It usually takes about 3 or 4 minutes, depending on the subject. 3 or 4 minutes, kind of goes back and forth. It's their brain warm-up kind of idea. They're going back and forth. And then all of a sudden I see it die down. And then I'll ask if anybody wants to share. What did they hear? What did they hear? What did they think was interesting? Did they learn anything? And then we move into a discovery session where I have sample prompts. I have ideas for them to discover based on the subject we're talking about in class. And then they're off. Them and their partner, or them and by themselves, depending on the assignment. They're off to discover the information, find out using AI to help them find it, summarize it, and then their job is to look at the information, look at the textbook's information, verify that information holds true. And if there's a difference, because there is sometimes, we talk about, why is there a difference? What's the difference? And why would there be a difference on the internet? Did the AI just make something up? Is it a research study that was found that has different results or different interpretation of things, different vocabulary that is not being used, definitions that are different? Why is that different? And sometimes, especially in psychology, what we find is that there is new evidence or new studies or new experiments that have been done, and the textbook is 4, 5, 6 years old, and so these new studies provided new information. And after that's happened 1 or 2 times in my class, it's almost like the students are hoping to find that. They're like literally looking to see, can we find any new information that shows that this textbook's outdated and there's new information? Because when that happened the first time in the class, students were like, oh my gosh, you found this like gold at the bottom of the ocean. Like you discovered something, you've disproven the textbook. And it was this glorious moment for that group of students that they said, look, we found this evidence and it's showing that this is changing. It had to do with neuroscience in the brain and the prefrontal cortex, and its development. And so it was very interesting for those students. And I can tell you that it was far more engaging of a class than me just going through the parts of the brain on the PowerPoint. Far more engaging. And the class flew by, and the conversations were flying, and the questions were happening, and I was being able to get up and walk around and talk to students, guide them as they found information, as they asked questions about the information as it related to the textbook. And is it the same or is this different? And I can help guide them with questions. Why do you think this is different? What makes this different? Having them answer those questions. Now, I know what you're going to say is, yes, you are right, but that's great for psychology, but it doesn't work for my subject. I hear that a lot. Yes, psychology, this is great for psychology. Congratulations, you're doing great. But for my subject, it doesn't work. And I just challenge you, when you start to think that it doesn't work, it probably doesn't work the way you're currently doing it. It probably doesn't work the way you've always done it. And at some point, you're going to have to let go of that traditional model. And I know that's not easy. And the reality is that the traditional model, our students might not need. And I know, again, the romantic side of every discipline and education is that they are going to need every part of all of it. And with new technology, there's just some things that we've had to teach students to do that we're not going to have to teach them to do that anymore. We're going to have to teach them to do other things. And those other things are what we need to figure out. What's the most important other thing as they move past education? What's the most other thing that they need in education? What's the most important other thing that we maybe didn't spend a lot of time on in the past because it was, pretty easy for students, but now it's hard for students, and the stuff that was really hard for students has become really easy for students. And so we probably need to spend less time on the stuff that's easy for students and spend more time on what's hard for students. I mean, I just also saw a video about a guy who's saying that he has a method of teaching using AI to increase learning by 10x. Now, of course, in order to get that system, you have to pay for it, and I didn't pay for it. But I have seen in my classes that the use of AI and currently we're using a lot of Gemini's guided learning when we're going through the discovery phase. So when we're going through the discovery phase of the diver method, we're having students look at information, get asked questions. We're using Gemini's guided learning, and where I have a prompt, just a very simple prompt for them that helps kick them off into this guided learning with a partner. I love working in partners, especially if it's a face-to-face class, because the conversations that happen, I feel like there's two things that happen. We're a community college, and oftentimes community colleges can be commuter colleges. You go there, you go take a class, you leave. You may not even ever talk, especially if you're just going in and listening to a PowerPoint and never having to interact with anything. And so we're like this commuter college. And so I a couple years ago, I had a student I was talking to. They were just, having a bad day, and we were talking before class, and I just said, well, what's going on? She's like, look, I've been to school here for 2 years. I don't have one friend. And I was like, well, why don't you have any friends? She goes, well, I don't know. I just don't talk to anybody. I just go to my class and I leave. And I'm like, man, I was thinking to myself, in my opinion, that's not really what college is about. It's an exchange of ideas, not just the exchange of my ideas as the instructor to the student, but the exchange of student ideas to each other as they can bounce ideas off of each other and come up with conclusions, and then vet those conclusions with somebody who may have more answers than them, like an instructor. And so I started thinking about group work in classes, and not traditional group work. I mean, I'm really talking about discussions, and not necessarily formal discussions. I'm talking about a time where they can process information verbally with somebody else and understand that, they can have conversations where they could ask questions that they wouldn't necessarily want to ask their instructor, because they don't want their instructor to think they don't know something, so they can explore ideas a little bit back and forth with each other. And what I found is that in this time where we're doing this discovery with guided learning and it's asking questions, they'll have this mini conversation between questions. And then as they think about what is the next question they're going to ask, or get answered or answer, then that exploration continues in a really cool way, and eventually they might even become friends, people that they wouldn't have normally spoken to. In fact, I've had multiple students tell me, this is the only class I have a friend. It's funny because when we start this whole conversation, start working in groups, one of the things I have to remind my students is make sure you introduce yourself. Don't just get the subject, get the assignment, and just go right into it. First, introduce yourself. At least your first name. Hey, my name's Alan. How are you? Let's work on this thing, And again, I know that works great for you, but it won't work for me. Well, it might not work exactly for you, but I really highly encourage you to think about it in a different way. I will say that the soft skills of humans working with humans, people working with people, is going to be a very valued skill. And so if you can incorporate some of that into your classes, and I know that it's a valuable skill, because I can tell you most students don't want to do it. They don't want to do it. And so if they don't want to do it, what has happened is it creates the people that can do it are valued, because look, they're like, hey, can you do outside sales? No, I don't like to talk to people. I mean, I hear that all the time. No, I don't really like to talk to people. I'll do inside sales. I'll do, I just want to write reports. It's fine. I don't want to have to interact with people. Well, part of that is that they just, they're not used to interacting with people. When they've come to realize how they can interact with people, work with people through problems in classes, then it allows them the confidence to work through problems with people outside of classes. And that's a skill, right? I mean, that's what we want students to be able to do. Work with students or work with people outside of the classes to help solve those problems. And I think that's what we're trying to get. It's another skill that we can teach students.